Hello and God bless you all. Today we continue our series, Jesus in the Old Testament, where we see a pre-God in the flesh Jesus before he came in the flesh 4,000 years into human history. Last week we talked about Jesus, a shadow of Jesus, an image of Jesus in the book of Genesis chapter 15, when Abram, better known to most of you as Abraham, was talking with God. He had a steward in his house whose name was Eliezer, who had just had a son because God had already promised Abram, that he was going to have a son that was, that he was going to bless his seed. And so Abram thought that maybe the son of Eliezer would be his heir, but God told him that his heir will come out of his own body and not from this servant. And then God makes a covenant with Abram, and he parts a bullock, a she-goat, and a ram. He cuts them into two pieces and lays them down, and he also takes a dove and a pigeon, but he doesn't part them. And then there's a burning furnace, a smoking furnace, and a burning lamp that pass through the pieces. And we believe that that's God and Jesus passing through those pieces, God being a consuming fire and Jesus being the light of the world. And today we're going to be in the next chapter, and we're talking about a pre-God in the flesh Jesus visiting Hagar. So we'll start here in verse 1. We're going to read Genesis 16, and we're going to read 1 through 14. And it says, "So now Sarai, Abram's wife, bore him no children, and she had a handmaiden, an Egyptian whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said unto Abram, Behold, now the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened unto the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt in Canaan 10 years. After Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband, Abram, to be his wife." So as we see here in these first three verses, like we said in the previous chapter, Abram had a steward, Eliezer, in his house, who had he had a son. Eliezer had a son, and Abram thought that this child would be his heir because he's a part of his household. But God told him, no, it's going to come out of your own body. Your seed is going to follow this child. So we see here that in verse 2, Sarai, Abram's wife, is telling him that the Lord has restrained me from giving you a child. So I'm going to give you my handmaiden. And maybe you can take care of your wife, and she can have a son that can be mine. Basically, like Abram was thinking about Eliezer. She had the same mindset. He thought that since Eliezer was a part of his household, that possibly a servant or something that says a steward. So we're thinking that he was probably some type of servant of Abram's, and he'd obtained a child, through his wife and his family that he had. But Abram was his master, so Abram thought, okay, since this guy has a child, his child can be my heir because he's a part of my household. So that's what Sarai thought here too. She goes, okay, I'm barren. I've lived 80 plus years or so on this earth without bearing children, but I have a handmaiden, and if I give her to Abraham to be his wife, and he and her had to get together and she conceives to have a baby, this will be counted as my child, since I can't bear my own. Basically, like I said, it's the same mindset that Abram had. So Abram had listened to his wife, and he took Hagar to be his wife, and they consummate and have a baby, as we'll see here in verse 4. And when he went in unto her, which that means that they consummated the marriage, when he went into Hagar, and she conceived, when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. Now, as we see here, this is kind of interesting here, because Sarai wasn't able to have kids. So she gave Hagar, her handmaiden, unto Abraham, her husband. She decided to, when she gave her husband to, when Sarai gave Hagar into her husband so that she could obtain a child through Hagar, like I said, it worked. Hagar conceived. And then after she conceived, she kind of thought that she was better than Sarai, because Sarai wasn't able to give Abram a son, but she was. So she basically didn't have any more respect for Sarah after that. And we see here in verse 5 that Sarai knows that now that Hagar thinks she's better than Sarai, he doesn't have any respect for her. We see this here in verse 5, and it says, And Sarai said unto Abram, My wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid unto thy bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord's judge between me and thee. So we see here that Hagar no longer had a respect for Sarah. And Sarah was like, I was just wanting to give you a son, and the woman I gave unto you to bear a son, now she thinks she's better than me, and she don't have any respect for me. So now we see what Abraham says. It says, But Abram said unto Sarai, Behold, thy maid is in thy hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee. And when Sarai dealt harshly with her, she fled from her face. So Abraham, he sees how stressed out Sarai is and everything, but by what Hagar, how she hadn't had respect for her. So he said, she's your servant. Do to her whatever seems good to you. So she ends up being cruel to Hagar, and which makes Hagar run away. And she runs away pregnant with Abram's baby. And as we said here, we believe that this is Jesus visiting Hagar by the fountain here. Yes, and we'll see why as we go on and reading the next 8 verses here. 7 or 8 verses. And the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way to Shur. Hope I said that word right. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, whence comest thou, and whither wilt thou go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Return to thy mistress, and submit thyself into her hands. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and thou shalt call his name Emmanuel, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. And he will be a wild man, his hand will be against every man, and every man his hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. And as we see here, Hagar just runs off after Sarai is cruel with her. So she runs off and she ends up going to this fountain that's on the way to Shur. And the angel of the Lord visits her. And the angel of the Lord tells her to go back to Sarai and submit to her, put herself under Sarai's authority. And the angel of the Lord promises Hagar that she will have a son. And just like what was promised to Abraham, that her seed would increase greatly and be without number. He tells her to call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard her cries. And then he talks about what type of person Ishmael is going to be. That his hand is going to be against every man, and every man's hand will be against him. But he'll be in the place with his brethren. And this is where we believe that the Muslim people came from. They came from Isaac. The people who, dwell with people in Israel now, that they dwell with them just like it says, but they're against them. And we're going to verse 13 here, and it says, And she called the name of the Lord that spoke unto her, Thou God seeth me, for she said, I have also here looked after him that seeth me. So basically here, she's talking about to the Lord who was talking to her. She gave this name. You're the God who sees. Because she said, I have I not even here in the wastelands had a vision of God and am still living. That's kind of like another way to translate it. That she believed that she saw God, a vision of God, and she still lives. Wherefore the well is called Begotten. Sorry if I mispronounced that word. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. But this word here that we tripped over, we have the Strong's definition for it. Berleki Roy, the well of the living one that sees me. That's what the definition is. The well of the living one that sees me. Because, as she thought there in verse 13, that I had seen God and I'm still living. That's why we believe that that's a vision of Jesus. Because we know that no man can see God and live. So God comes in different forms to the people here in the Old Testament. And this verse right here in John 1:18 is an interesting way of putting it. Let's see if we can find. Okay, let's see. Because it says here, no man hath seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father, he hath declared him. So this is saying here that no man has really seen God. Only Jesus. And I always thought that meant that no one has seen God except for Jesus. Like, Jesus is the only one that's seen God. Which is true. But maybe it's telling us that no one in the Old Testament actually seen God, but they seen Jesus. Just like this story. She believed that she's seen God and lives, but I believe that she's seen the Son of God and lived. Not the presence of the Lord that we can't, in these mortal bodies, live if we see. I believe she's seen Jesus. Anyway, like I said, I think this is a little fun series, just, pointing out some different scriptures where we see a pre-God in the flesh, Jesus. Like I said, you can agree to disagree with it if you don't believe it's exactly what happened with it. I just think it's something kind of fun. Just kind of a thing to think about, that maybe we see Jesus in the flesh before he was in the flesh. Because we know several scriptures in the New Testament talk about how Jesus had been there with God. John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. Also Revelation 13:8 talks about the Lamb slain for the foundation of the world, which shows that Jesus was there from the foundation of the world. And it also shows that God knew that all this is going to get messed up. And this may even be even knowing about the angels falling. From the foundation of the world, God knew that everything would get messed up. And it wasn't like he created the law, seeing that these people couldn't keep it, and messed up. He thought, oh God, what I'm going to do? Guess I better go to plan B. I don't think it was like a plan B thing. It was, God knew before he created all this that we're going to mess it up. And that's interesting to think about, how God knew that we were going to mess it up and still created it anyway. Because think about anything we create. Maybe we like to be a painter, but we know we're not any good. Maybe we want to draw sketches, but we know we're not good. Maybe we want to take pictures, but we know they're not like good enough that anybody would care about them. Maybe you make pottery, or like sculptures out of clay or something, or you want to, but you know it ain't gonna turn out to be good. So you think about that, and you think maybe you like to write poetry or write a book, but you think, I'm not very good at it. I know for me, I always enjoyed writing. I always thought it was fun. And I enjoy doing it. But then when I go back and read it, I'm like, what in the world was I trying to say? That's why I think I'm a better speaker than I am a writer. And it's actually one thing kind of funny, because my home church that I go to every Sunday and Wednesday, the preacher's nephew is running the church website. And I get to preach there from time to time. Not very often, and it is what it is about it. I mean, if the Lord wanted me to preach more, I think he would open the door for me to be able to. And if he doesn't, that's fine. So anyway, her nephew, the preacher's nephew, he had told me, he said one time, he goes, well, I got this little section on the blog, on the website, for people that can blog. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Well, I was sitting there thinking, you don't want me to put anything on there, because I can talk, but if I write it out, let me tell you, it is not going to make a bit of sense. It'll make sense to me at the time when I'm writing it, but I'll go back and read it later on, and I'll be going like, what in the world did I just write? Doesn't make a bit of sense. It's like the thoughts in my brain and what comes out of my hand are completely different. Anyway, I say that to say this. If we had all these different things, we wanted to write poetry or whatever, knowing that we'd like to have this desire to do it, and then know that we're not getting good, it might just discourage us to say, I'd love to make I'd love to make a sculpture, just take this clay in my hand and mold it into whatever I want it to look like. And you may want it to look like something beautiful, animal or something like that, and it turns up looking like something nightmares are made of. I don't know. I know I've tried to make stuff with pottery before, like clay before. And I try to make this animal, whatever. Then they have like one huge eye, another one, just like didn't come out at all what my vision of it was supposed to be. So anyway, I just think about that, how God created these people He wants to have a relationship with. And He created us thinking, knowing, I'm going to create this person, and they're going to mess up. And it's just crazy to think how God said, yeah, I'm not doing that. I don't want to deal with these people messing up. But He did. He created us. Created us knowing we're going to mess up. Anyway, like I said, I do believe that there's times that Jesus was in the Old Testament. And we've seen the first example was the image of Jesus, what I believe was the burning torch, because Jesus is the light of the world. And we see here an angel of the Lord visiting Hagar. But she didn't consider it an angel of the Lord. She considered it that she saw a vision of God and she lived. And that's why I believe it's Jesus. Because Jesus is God. And trying to think about that in the natural, it's hard to explain. I mean, we know that God is made up of three: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. But to think that there's three different things, but they're all one thing, it doesn't make sense to our mind, if we try to think it out logically. So I believe this angel of the Lord was Jesus, who is God. So she did see God. She didn't see the true presence of God, that no one can live in this mortal body, can live after seeing Him and being in His presence. But she did see God in His close to Jesus form, but not Jesus yet, because He wasn't born. Anyway, we got a few more examples. We'll probably do about 6 more parts, I guess. Because there's some different parts. I mean, some different sections where it talks about people that believe they've seen God face to face and everything. So anyway, I hope you got something out. If you did, give God glory. Like I said, you may agree that this is Jesus in the flesh. You may say you're reaching. So read it for yourself. Don't take my word for it or anybody else's. I do believe, and in my studies, I do believe that there are other people who believe this as well. Haven't seen too many people thinking about the burning lamp as a shadow of Jesus, but there is other people that have seen this story as believed it to be Jesus. And actually, that's what one of the next stories I would have came up with without researching it, because I was thinking about a chapter in Genesis a little bit later on. But I do believe this is a child of Jesus. And if you believe it, that's great. If you don't, that's fine too. Just read the word for yourself. Like I said, pray to God daily. Get a relationship with Him. Pray to Him daily. Just thank Him for whatever He's doing. It doesn't matter how you're doing it. If it's in the car, on the way to work. Just when you first get out of bed, you're slipping out of bed and you're slipping your slippers on and going to the bathroom and brushing your teeth and everything. Just thank Him as you're doing all that. It don't have to be in a long, extravagant, drawn-out prayer and anything like that. Just communicate with Him. Excuse me. So pray to Him. Read His Word every day, even if it's just one chapter. Excuse me. Pray to Him, read His Word. Pray for a revelation of what you just read after you read. Just as simple as saying, Lord, I pray that you give me an understanding of what you want me to get out of what I just read. Just that simple. You don't have to go an extravagant prayer with that either. Just say, Lord, show me what you want me to read, what you want me to get out of what I'm about to read. Then, Lord, I pray you show me what you want me to get out of what I just read. That's all you got to do. It's just that simple. Just a couple of, like I said, you don't have to do no long, extravagant, drawn out things. Just thank the Lord for what He's doing. Anyway, I love you. God bless you. I hope, excuse me. Hope you're enjoying this series. I sure am, because I love seeing Jesus in the Old Testament. It's really exciting. And I mean just that. Just thinking about like Genesis 3:15, where God, is handing down the punishments for Adam and Eve. And Adam's saying, the wife you gave me made me eat. And then the wife's going, well, that serpent deceived me. So he cursed Adam, he curses Eve, curses Adam, saying that, he's going to till the land, and the sweat of his brow will be his meat. And which basically I think is talking about how it's going to be work. It's not going to be just almost like when you're sleeping on the floor. Because there's preachers I've talked about one time. They're talking about people ranking in heaven, and this one preacher said one time, and he goes, "Are you going to be the person sweeping off the dust on the streets of gold, or the person watching someone sweep?" And I'm thinking to myself, well, if I am the one sweeping the floor in heaven, at least my back won't be aching. Because right here in the natural, you go to doing something too long, you start to ache, especially as you get older. And that's what I believe that's what that curse to Adam was. And Eve, of course, now, women have pain in childbirth and all the different things that they go through with periods and whatnot. I believe that's all part of the curse that he gave her. He also cursed the ground, God did, and he also cursed the serpent. And he said that the woman's seed, would bruise his head, and he would bruise his heel. And of course, a woman doesn't have the seed, a man does. So it's a foreshadowing of the virgin birth, which is Jesus. So there's things like that I just really enjoy seeing through the Old Testament. But these little stories like this, about the angel of the Lord and different things, possibly being Jesus. Like I said, I'm not saying that without a shadow of a doubt, this is Jesus, you need to accept it as Jesus. I'm just thinking it possibly is. I believe it is. I could be wrong. But I think it's fun to kind of think about Jesus coming to visit the people of this world before he came as the Savior of the world. Anyway, like I said, I hope you got something out of it. If you did, give God glory. I love you. God bless you. Can't wait for next week, as we will be in Genesis again. I love you. God bless you. Hope you have a great week. We'll see you next week, God willing.